In this lecture, we will talk about homeostasis. What is homeostasis and where do we get this terminology? It's originated from Greek and Latin words, homeo, which means similar to, and stasis, which means standing still. In combination together, homeostasis means making sure in a similar standing position, which means trying to maintain the normal physiology and to restore the normal state once it has been disrupted. So how do we maintain normal state? To maintain normal state, we need to have a set point. For example, like gold standard, we need to have a gold standard. Of course, there will be some imbalance minor, which are minor going slightly to one end or the other end, but at least it is being maintained in that nearest and closer to the set point. So number one, we need to have a set point. And number two, we need to detect if there is any changes beyond the set point or acceptable range. And the body need to react to this deviation, usually by negative feedback mechanism. And finally, any deviation which deviates beyond the set point will get regulated. So I want you to remember, to maintain homeostasis, you need set point, feedback, and regulation. So how do we regulate? Regulation includes both local and reflex control. Local means like nearby structures, paracrine glands, autocrine responses, and reflex control like nervous and endocrine, which will take a little bit longer. For example, like endocrine control might take a bit longer because it's came from the hormone and readjusted. And with nervous control, it might be reflex and a lot more quicker than endocrine system. Let's look at this diagram. This is what we have talked about. Now there is a stimulus. Stimulus is the deviation from the set point that is sensed by the body sensors. And then it will go to the control system. And finally, the control system will provide message and information to affected organs so that the stimulus has been reduced and reset to normal set point. This is what we call a negative feedback. If you look at this diagram, then body temperature is 37 degrees centigrade. We try to maintain very closely around that temperature. Once the body temperature has exceeded beyond 37 degrees centigrade, the nerve cells in the skin and the brain will detect it, and it will go to the thermoregulatory center, which is called temperature regulatory center in the brain, thermoregulatory center. And then what does it do? It will ask the blood vessels to dilate so that increased blood flow to the skin so that more heat exchange can occur. Increase blood flow to the skin as well, and the depth of the respiration increase so that we can evaporate heat and exchange heat through the respiratory system. all these effects will improve and lower the body temperature, and it will have negative impact on the sensors, and now the temperature is maintained back to the normal. When we talk about homeostasis, there is another terminology which is called allostasis. It is slightly different from homeostasis because allostasis means maintaining the stability through the changes. So this terminology being started by Starling and Ear, and they said organisms must be able to change with changing environment, which is, in other words, it is trying to adjust and adapt for the survival. I want you to think about that. One of the examples for the homeostasis, let's say if there is increase in blood osmolarity, there is increase in solute, that will stimulate the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus will secrete vasopressin into the bloodstream. That vasopressin will go to the kidney, will go and act on the collecting deck and increase the water permeability, so that increase water reabsorption from the kidneys, from the urine. And then there will be more blood, more water in the blood, and that will decrease the blood osmolarity. So this has negative effect, negative feedback on the stimulus on the osmoreceptor. And now our normal homeostasis maintained. Of course, at the same time, activate the thirst center, the hypothalamus, increase in thirst, increase water intake, that we again decrease the blood osmolarity. So what is positive feedback? It is different from negative feedback, because negative feedback, if something is going wrong, it's trying to correct back to the normal. But in positive feedback, this positive feedback, it's changed the intensity rather than reversing. For example, like in childbirth, in a pregnant mother, once the delivery starts, the fetal head starting to present in the uterus cervix. Cervix is the lowest portion of the uterus, just before it enters into the birth canal, vaginal canal. And once this starts, there will be positive feedback. So it starts from the head of the baby, push it against the cervix. Then that stimulates the nerve in the cervix, and impulse transmitted to the brain. The brain stimulates pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin from the pituitary. This oxytocin will be carried out in the bloodstream and will go to the uterus. And oxytocin will stimulate the uterus muscle, smooth muscle, and that will push more on the cervix. And because being more pressure on the cervix, the head of the baby pushed against the cervix, and it's just giving more and more force, more and more intensifying effect. That is the positive mechanism. Okay, I'm going to stop here.